Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberly Hepner, and today is November 14th, 2013. When we're not on air, you can always check us out at www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can simply click on weather or type in weather.gov and navigate to the destination of your choice of Alaska. And then you can also reach us via the phone line. The weather information line is 1-800-472-0391. And as always, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Now, heading on to the highlights of the day, we had some very active weather this week. Well, for tonight, we still have winter weather advisories along the northern Arctic coast and a blizzard warning as you head towards the eastern Beaufort Sea. And this is for blowing snow across this area between 30 and 40 miles per hour, with gusts up to 50 miles per hour possible along that east Beaufort Sea coast. And as we wrap along the North Arctic and to the Northwest Arctic coastal areas, there are some advisories still out for the coast as strong winds continue to push the water up along and storm surge occurs along these areas. That'll be in effect through tomorrow morning. So as we head further south, these areas are actually cleared from the storm warnings this evening. We do these maps around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and since then they've updated just the Arctic Village area and south towards Fort Yukon, and these areas are out of the winter storm warnings. However, as you head south towards Fairbanks and towards the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, these winter storm warnings are in effect until tomorrow morning. And now looking further south along the western part of Prince William Sound, we still have a high wind warning out this evening. That's going to run till midnight for high winds, again near Whittier, with gusts possible to 60 to 75 miles per hour. Looking at your satellite further west, here's the moisture that's streaming up over the ridge of high pressure that's stationed over the northern parts of the Pacific. This has brought lots of moisture along a front that's draped over the central parts of the Bering. Now, putting that into motion one more time, you can watch that moisture stream up in and across the Bering towards the southwestern coast. And then we'll take a look closer to home, and we'll see where the moisture has streamed all the way across parts of south central and to the southeast. This ridge of high pressure has moved a little bit further north at the center of the high pressure towards Adak and Unalaska, so a little bit clearing in subsidence around the center of the high pressure, and all this low moisture is being advected across the state. Further to the north, these are lower clouds. The darker colors are actually just lower clouds that are closer to the surface, where these are really high clouds out across the Bering. So not clear across the north, and as you drop towards the south central coastline, you can see this area where it borders the warm air with the lighter colors against the darker colors for the lower cloud temperatures, where there's colder temperatures right along here. Some breaks in the clouds early in the day across the southeastern areas, and as you can see, this warm air is pushing all this moisture further to the east. So the southeast is definitely going to see the cloudy skies overnight tonight. And here's what happened across the state today. We had colder temperatures coming in across the northwest, and we still had snow continuing across much of the eastern parts of the state. The frontal boundary stalled just around the southwestern coast back towards back towards the western parts of the Bering. Warmer temperatures to the south with rain all across this boundary here, and dense fog across the Bristol Bay and to the north of the Aleutian chain. Like I said, in the early parts of the day, the southeast saw a break of the clouds, but then this warm front pushed inland and brought some heavy to moderate to heavy rainfall along with it. Scattered shower activity still continues late this afternoon across much of the Gulf of Alaska. Looking along the eastern areas, you can see this is where the heaviest parts of the snow is occurring this afternoon, and that'll continue in the overnight hours. A few light showers are going to linger across the western parts of the Alaska range, but as we head in your forecast for tomorrow, this colder air mass the temperatures are going to drop across much of the state and bring cold temperatures all the way towards the south central areas. Now we'll have some light snow showers, light to moderate snow showers continuing across the eastern parts of the Alaska range, and rain mainly across the southeast with a mix of snow and rain in the higher elevations as you head towards the north. Looking across the southwestern areas, a snow-rain mix along the boundary where this cold and warm air mass are located. So there are also possibilities for freezing rain in the Bristol, just on the western capes possibly in the Bristol Bay area, just to the north of the Kuskokwim Delta. So like I said, freezing rain chances along the western coasts here. Lighter showers mainly as we head up towards the Bering Strait and along the northern parts of the state. Expect light scattered activity, but colder temperatures indeed. And as we head into your Friday forecast, look for this low pressure system to advance further towards the Bethel area, and like I said, this is going to bring the chances of freezing rain temperatures as the warm air mass is trying to push up against the colder air mass to the north. In the meanwhile, this warm front will stay stalled pretty much through the day on Friday, all the way out across into the western parts of the Bering area. Across the southeast, the low pressure system will begin to push inland, and they'll be able to clear out later in the day. And then as we head to the north, mainly scattered areas of showers and benign conditions are going to replace all the snow and the freezing rain conditions that have occurred across the past few days. Looking out towards the far western parts of the Aleutian chain, rain mainly across the western part of the Aleutians with the mix just to the north of the low pressure system. Very cold airs across the eastern parts of Russia around a high pressure that's going to continue to build in through Friday. So high pressure, as you can see, is going to be the dominant pressure system across much of the Bering by the end of Friday and much of the state of Alaska. So this is going to be a much colder weekend in the coming days. As we look at your Saturday forecast, that high pressure is going to continue and bring the cold temperatures all the way across South Central, and eventually it's going to begin to seep on into the areas of the southeast, probably later in the day on Saturday. So they should start off with some scattered showers with weak low pressure near the Dixon entrance and a mix of rain and snow as you head into the higher elevations as you move to the north. Along the Aleutian chain, the cold air is going to make its way all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. Some light showers are going to be possible as the front is overrun by this cold air mass that's coming in behind it. Now this low pressure system that's sitting across the western Aleutians might look ominous as it's an occluded front, but it's only 1,005 millibar low, and it's going to have some fog and rain along with the system, but this high pressure is going to strengthen quite a bit. It's 1041 by the time we get into Saturday. So this is going to help pull that cold air down and keep this low pressure system at least off to the west of the eastern part of the Aleutians through your day on Saturday. As we look at your temperatures for today across the southeast, we saw temperatures mainly in the upper 30s to lower 40s and some into the upper 40s as you headed down towards the Dixon entrance. But look at these temperature gradients across southeast going into south central. Parts of the south central area saw down into the teens near Gulkana and 40 degrees in the Prince William Sound area. And then as we headed north, some warm temperatures still across the Alaska Range as winds helped mix down some of the warmer temperatures. And as we headed towards the Arctic coast, even warmer here up in the upper teens and lower 20s along the Arctic coast. Now back across the northwestern areas, a little bit cooler than yesterday, only getting up into the lower 20s. So you can see that that air mass is already coming in and affecting all the way down towards the Seward Peninsula, where they were reported in the teens to the upper 20s. Coldest temperature was at Atkasuk at 10 degrees later this afternoon. And then, wow, look at this gradient here in the mid to 30s to upper 40s across the Alaska Peninsula. Very warm temperatures across the eastern Aleutians with 56 degrees occurring at Dutch Harbor today. And as you headed out towards the Aleutian chain, just temperatures moderating in the lower to mid 40s, even across the Pribilofs here. And then when we get into your low temperatures tonight, not much of a temperature change here, as it's going to be in the lower 40s to upper 30s all across the Aleutian chain. And then as we head into the southwestern areas, you can see the freezing line is going to be right across that southwestern areas with just above freezing temperatures right off the coast, and that's going to cause the problems for overnight in this area. The rest of the state looks like it's going to get very cold in the lower teens across most of the area, and even dipping below zero across the eastern parts of the interior. Temperatures across the southeast are going to get colder as well in the mid-20s to mid-30s here. And then for your temperatures tomorrow, not much of a warm air mass around here any longer. They're only getting up into the mid-40s with some precip, keeping those temperatures cooler on across the Gulf Coast area, just above freezing, possibly into the western areas where the warm front's going to be lingering. So we'll see temperatures in the mid-30s here. As you look north, much colder temperatures in the teens and the lower 20s once again, just continuing on further to the south, those cold temperatures. Out across the chain, another warm day in the upper 40s and lower 50s for you. And then looking at your flying weather as we head into tomorrow, the IFR and MVFR cover much of the western parts of the state for tomorrow, with some breaks with the higher colder air mass coming back in towards the south central areas. There will be some lingering MVFR conditions across the Alaska Range, but look at the western coast, IFR conditions across much of the area here, all the way up to the northwestern Arctic coast. Along the areas of the southeast, we'll expect MVFR conditions here, possibly clearing out later in the day on Friday. And looking at your pass conditions in more detail, Anaktuvuk Pass will be MVFR, and Adigan Pass will be MVFR as well. Looking at Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, they will go MVFR down to IFR. And then Rainy Pass will be MVFR for the day, and Windy Pass will be MVFR as well. Isabel Pass will be IFR, improving to IFR possibly later in the day. And then Mentasta Pass will be MVFR through the day. Tanita Pass will be VFR. Expect Portage to be VFR as well, and Chilkoot and White Pass will be MVFR and possibly improving to VFR conditions later. Freezing levels will linger around the southwestern parts of the state and down across the southeast. This might be a little bit further south than what's depicted by tomorrow morning, depending where this air mass moves into. So this low pressure system should lift a little bit further north, bring the 2,000-foot levels to the Kuskokwim Delta area, and then down to 10,000 feet as you head into the southern parts of the Gulf, and 2,000 to 6,000 over across the southeast, with temperatures right around 2,000 to 10,000 just to the north of the chain. And looking at your icing tomorrow, mainly below 8,000 feet, should have light icing across the northern areas of the Brooks Range, on down across the southwest, and then across the Alaska Peninsula on over to the western parts of the Aleutian chain just north of there, with occasional icing across the Pribilof area. looking at your jet stream here, it's still very strong across the south part of the state, between 130 to 165 knots out of the northwest. This is going to help to push that cold air mass in. And looking at the southeastern areas, a northwesterly flow here as well, between 80 and 150 knots as you drop further to the south. Looking at your 9,000 foot winds, we have a very zonal flow in across the Bering areas, and then it switches out of a slight northwest flow across the Alaska Peninsula and the Kenai on into the Gulf, between 45 and 75 knots here, fairly strong, and 30 knots across the southeast at the northwest, with a northwesterly flow 70 knots across much of the Gulf of Alaska. Looking at your 3,000 foot winds, we have the same flow across the Gulf, and lighter winds noted across the northern parts of the state between 10 and 30 miles per hour, with the strongest winds just off the eastern Beaufort seacoast. Along the southwestern areas, expect stronger flow around 45 knots across the eastern Bering, back towards the central Bering, where they switch out of the southwest here at 30 knots. And once again, looking at your turbulence for tomorrow, will be across this area where we saw the very strong jets were, and we'll expect occasional turbulence across the Alaska Peninsula below 5,000 feet, below 5,000 feet, to the Arctic, below 8,000 feet across the Alaska Peninsula. And looking out here towards the western part of the Aleutians, some light turbulence here, mainly below 15,000 feet. All right, we'll be back in just a moment with your marine forecast.
Double your cluster, double your fun, and the farthest thing you can see with the naked eye. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
It's that time of year when you can see one of the most famous star clusters, the Pleiades, better known as the Seven Sisters.
But did you know that there are two more star clusters, twin clusters so to speak, just a short visual distance away?
And have you ever wondered what was the farthest thing you can see with the naked eye? Let's show you. Okay, we've got our skies set up for next week around 9 p.m. If you look above the eastern horizon, you'll see what looks like an exquisite, tiny little dipper-shaped cluster of stars, the Seven Sisters.
Now, most people only see 6 stars here with the naked eye, but really good eyes under ideal conditions can see 7 or more. With binoculars, you could see several dozen. There are really over 250 stars here, all much larger and hotter than our own sun. And cosmically speaking, they're not very distant, only about 400 light years away, which means that we see the Pleiades as they existed 400 years ago, about the time Galileo first trained a telescope on them and discovered them to be a family of dozens of suns.
Now, to find the twin clusters, look directly above the North Star where you'll see 5 stars that trace out the M-shaped constellation of Cassiopeia, the Queen. Then, to the right of Cassiopeia, you'll see 2 faint, fuzzy Q-tip shaped objects. And if you're far away from city lights, where it's good and dark out, you'll notice that they are embedded in the river of light we call the Milky Way.
Now, these 2 dim fuzzy balls of light are called the double cluster of Perseus. And although each has about 100 more stars than the Pleiades, the reason they don't present as dramatic an appearance as the Pleiades is because they are so much farther away. In fact, unlike the Pleiades' 400 light years distance, they are a grand 7,000 light years away.
Now, let's get back to my question about the farthest thing that's visible with the naked eye. Let's start with the moon. It's very easy to see, and it's almost 250,000 miles away. Let's step it up a notch and take a look at Venus. Next week, Venus will be about 50 million miles away, still easily seen with the naked eye. Let's go another step and look at Jupiter next week. The king of the planets is about 450 million miles away, and still easily seen with the naked eye.
We're approaching the answer, but we have a long way to go yet. We can't describe how far we can see in terms of miles alone. We have to shift to light years, with each light year being about 6 trillion miles. Quite a jump, eh? We're not talking about just a few light years either. we're talking about more than 2 million light years. But what could be so bright that we can see it with our unaided eyes at such a distance?
To answer that, let's find the great square of Pegasus, the horse. If we draw lines between 4 not quite so bright stars, we would trace a great celestial square, and with a few other stars and a little imagination, we could connect stars to the west of this square to make a long neck with the bright star Enif as our horse's nose, and a few dim stars from the northwest point of the square to form 2 front legs. And using the bright star to the northeast, we draw lines between the faint stars of Andromeda and come up with 2 hind legs.
And it's a very special object just off the knee of one of these hind legs, which provides the answer to our question. It's difficult to find, and you must have clear, dark, moonless skies like next week. It's the farthest object we can see with the naked eye. It's called M31, the Great Galaxy of Andromeda, which, through a telescope, reveals itself to be a gigantic family of over 250 billion stars. That's over 2 million light years away.
So we have 3 star clusters and 1 galaxy that are visible with the unaided eye in a fairly small chunk of the night sky next week. Keep looking up.
Welcome back to the show and on to your Friday marine forecast across the southeastern areas. Expect mainly a northerly flow across the inner channels with small crafts 25 to 30 knots, and seas will be 5 feet across the inner channels. Along the outer waters, expect an offshore flow 25 knot small craft to the north, and then as you head towards the Dixon entrance, we'll see winds around 20 knots just off of Sitka's area, and gales are going to continue just during the morning hours as you head further south. The inner channels again will have seas 5 feet, and the outer channels will be between 7 and 11 feet with the highest seas as you head towards the north. And then for your Saturday forecast, expect a northerly flow along the inner channels at 25 knots small craft, and then 20 knots as you head further south towards Ketchikan out of the southeast here, and seas again will be between 4 and 5 feet. And then along the offshore areas, expect a northern or easterly flow as you head up towards the northern parts of the Gulf, and seas will be between 6 and 7 feet and change of direction as you head further south, 20 knots, and becoming westerly as you get towards that Dixon entrance. Seas will be between 7 and 11 feet here. Looking on across to your south central forecast, a north to northwesterly flow across the northern parts of the Gulf, and 10 knots across the Prince William Sound with 15 to 20 knots all across the western parts of the Gulf. And turning out of the west as you head towards Kodiak and out of the southwest across Shelikof. And then as you head up north towards the inlet, a northwesterly flow across the Barren Islands area, and variable winds across the Cook Inlet between 1 and 2 foot seas here, and 2 feet seas across the Prince William Sound, and 5 to 8 feet across the western parts of the Gulf, 6 foot seas across Shelikof, and 5 feet through the western parts of the Barren Islands. As we head into your Saturday forecast, it becomes all of a northerly flow to northwest as you head towards the Kodiak Island area. Small crafts along most of the Gulf waters and towards the Barren Islands, expect 30 knots across the Barren Islands. And then seas across the Gulf will be between 6 and 8 feet, across the Sound 4 feet, and along the inlet expect just a little bit of a lighter flow out of the northeast between 15 and 20 knots. Seas there will be between 3 to 5 feet as you head towards the Barren Islands. Seas will be 8 feet and 4 feet in the Shelikof Strait. Looking at your Friday forecast across the Bristol Bay area, winds will be between 20 and 30 knots with small crafts across much of the area. Seas will be between 8 to 11 feet all across the area. As we head into your Saturday forecast, northerly flow across the area with small crafts across the Bristol Bay and just south of Kodiak Island, and 20 knots as you head further further to the west. Seas here will be between 7 and 9 feet on Saturday. On your Friday forecast across the Aleutians, expect a southwesterly flow to south flow with small crafts along the areas in the west, and as you head up just the north of the Dutch Harbor area, winds here, like I said, will be out of the south direction with seas between 7 and 12 feet all across the entire chain. And on your Saturday forecast, expect a change in direction out of the north to northeasterly flow with small crafts across much of the area between 20 and 30 knots across the chain, and seas will be between 7 and 15 feet with the highest seas across the western parts of the Aleutians. Along the west coastern areas, much of the area will see a southwesterly flow with small crafts for tomorrow until you head further north up towards St. Lawrence Island, where it will be a northwesterly flow at 15 knots, some freezing spray as you head up towards the Strait area. Seas will generally be between 6 and 12 feet with the highest seas towards the Pribilof Islands. And then your Saturday forecast, a northerly flow across the area, small crafts just to the north of Nunivak Island at 25 knots. Seas will be between 7 and 9 feet. Heading up towards the Arctic coastal areas, looking at mainly a westerly flow all across the area tomorrow with brisk winds along the Arctic coast area back towards the northwest, where we'll see 25 knots here as well, and then dropping down to 15 knots across the northwestern area. Seas will be between 4 and 6 feet. As we head into your Saturday forecast, a northwesterly flow across the area with brisk winds along the eastern Beaufort Sea again, and back towards the northwestern areas we'll see lighter winds out of the northwest at 15 knots. Seas will be between 5 and 6 feet. And taking a recap of your forecast tonight, we're going to have some dense fog just in the evening hours across south central, and then lighter snow showers across the northwest with the heaviest snow showers across the Alaska Range. Light showery mix across the southeast, and across the southwest expect freezing drizzle possible with rain along the eastern parts of the eastern parts of the Bristol Bay area. All right, that's our forecast for today. Stay safe, travel. Be careful when you travel across the southeast, because those conditions have been really
These
tough.
forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.